Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Hopefully you're all in the right room. We're looking at Power BI for your Microsoft Dynamics AX implementation today. This is a repeat of the session that was run on Monday afternoon. So if any of you have sat in that, it will be the same content that we've already run. My name's Clay Wesner. I'm part of the product group solution architecture team. We work alongside R&D and some of our clients around the world, focusing on either new or different deployments that we have running around and involved in vNext as well. I've been spending a lot of my time recently focusing on business intelligence. We've just recently deployed Power BI, the functionality we're going to be talking about today at Lotus Formula One team as well, which I've been involved in. So today we're going to be focusing on Power BI. So we're not going to be looking at necessarily all the features that Power BI as a product has. We're going to be more talking about how it actually works alongside Dynamics AX. Okay, so there's lots of information online about all the visualizations and the technology that Power BI itself has. That's not necessarily what this session is going to be. It's going to hopefully be a little more AX focused in how it goes through. So for those of you who haven't worked with Power BI before or had any exposure to it, Power BI is a collection of different tools and technology that Microsoft have available, all with the word Power in the front of the name. So Power Query, Power View, Power Map, Power Q&A, all those types of products. Basically, we try and group it into two main sections. So on the left-hand side, we have our authoring and sort of insights tool, which operate within Microsoft Excel. Okay, so these tools are like Power Query, which we use to extract and transform data, Power View and Power Map, which we can actually create visualizations. So you may have, you may have worked with these tools before. So they're available within Excel now. You can use them. They don't require Office 365 or anything along those lines. You can use them to create visualizations. What we start introducing then, and some people may not have had experience with before, is then the Office 365 components. So then this is more the collaboration side and the cloud-powered side of Power BI. So once we've used Excel and those authoring tools to pull the data out in Power Query and we've prepared it, we've created our visualizations, we then use Office 365 to share those visualizations across your organization, and then tools like Q&A, which is the natural language search tools, where you can actually ask it questions in natural language, and it will give you visualizations back. So these are supposed to be complementary to each other. You use a mix of the different tools together. This is very much focused on how Power BI works today. At the end of the session today, we're going to talk a little bit about powerbi.com, which is the new sort of version that's coming out this year. There's some changes in how that works. You can do online authoring. You don't necessarily need to use Excel. So it does change the framework slightly, but this very much gives you an idea of how it works today. So a little bit of the landscape with AX and Power BI. I'm going to talk through a few little different components here. So starting with sort of our on-premise, I'll refer to on-premise. You may be in a data center or in a private cloud or something along those lines, but your non-Office 365 components, basically. So we're going to use Dynamics AX as our primary data source, and we're using OData services, which are web services that AX exposes data out. We publish it from a table or from a query. We pull it out through a web service, and we make that information available. So I'm going to step through at the beginning of the demo today and show you how that information is actually published out. The other little bit of on-premise information we're going to have is the data management gateway. So this is something that we make available through Office 365. This is how you handle your data refreshes. So once you've actually got that information up in the cloud and you've got your visualizations within Power BI, data management gateway is what happens in the background to actually keep getting your data back from on-premise AX up into the cloud for people to run those reports. Okay. The next set is then user tools. So this is then how you are actually authoring your reports, okay? So Power Query, Power View, Power Map, and Power Pivot, as I mentioned before. So these are all available within Excel, and this is where you actually work with the data. So what we're going to do on the demo today is you'll see us using Power Query to connect to our OData service, extract information out. We're going to transform it, clean it up within Power Query, make it very friendly to users, and then we're going to use Power View to put it into a nice visualization. Okay? So those are sort of the user tools that you actually work with. The top layer then that we introduce is then Office 365. Okay? So this is then when, once we've done that sort of first level, we've got a visualization, we want to share it, we want to collaborate with other people in our organization. That's where Office 365 come in. So some of the key components, the Excel data model and Power BI admin in the background there, that's really, again, how we're driving that refresh. So that's in the background how that data is being extracted up from your on-premise database and it's stored up in the cloud in Office 365. Power View works very much the same way it does work in Excel. It's just available through a web browser, HTML5, and you can use it on a lot of different devices. Power Q&A is then the fun stuff when we start getting into natural language searching. So this is when you can come in, I'm going to show you an example of it today, and you can actually come in and then in natural language ask it a question, and Q&A will go through that data that you've uploaded into your data model, and it will try and prepare a graph for you or a chart or a table based on what you've asked it. Okay? So it does it a lot more natural language. You don't really need any technical skills to be able to prepare it. So it's more that sort of interactive self-service BI that a user can have available to them. The last one, which is very, very helpful, is the data catalog. So you'll see, I'm going to spend a lot of time today in Power Query, and we're going to spend a lot of time transforming AX data. So some of the AX data queries, they're big queries. We're going to work with Proj Transposting Cube today. It's got something like 325 columns on it. It's got lots of rec IDs. It's got lots of date time fields that don't really have a time in it, but they have all the time information. Lots of data like that that you don't want a user looking at when they're looking at a nice chart. So we spend a lot of time in Power Query making the data look exactly how you want an end user to experience it and how you want them to see it within Q&A. What Data Catalog does is allow, once one person within your organization has spent that effort, they can actually save it into your Office 365 Data Catalog. And so that whole transformation process gets saved as a query, put up, and then other people within Excel can actually come in, search for it, grab your transformed query, and start working with the nice cleansed data at the end. And they don't have to repeat that process that someone else has gone into. Okay? So again, it's that Office 365 component is really just adding that collaboration and that sharing tool set on top of the authoring and collaboration that we get out of Excel. So the actual process that we're going to go through today. First step, extracting data. So we're going to do this via OData, as I said. So I'm going to very quickly show you where in AX we set up these data sources. Then we're going to jump into Excel, and we're going to go through and actually pull it into our Power Query model, so you can actually see the raw data, exactly how it comes out of AX. The next step that we're going to go through then is do some transformation. So once we've done some transformation, we're going to do things like remove a whole bunch of columns that we don't need. We're going to tidy up some date formats. We're going to add in things like the year and the quarter that the transaction relates to, just a little bit to make the data a little more presentable, a little bit easier to work with in our visualizations. Then we're going to create some visualizations. It's going to be very basic, but we'll create a nice Power View to have a look at. Once we've done that, we're going to publish it up into Office 365, so you can actually see the experience of publishing it up. And then the last step, we'll actually explore it a little bit. So we'll go through Office 365. We can have a look at Q&A and how we optimize it, some of those tool sets that are available within Office 365. Once we've gone through this process, the last little bit for today, then I'll run through powerbi.com very, very briefly and just talk about some of the nice things that are coming. It's in preview at the moment. It's not actually released to the public. The preview is, sorry, but it's not publicly available as a real product yet. So we'll have a look at that at the end. And then for questions as well, my aim is to have about 15 minutes left at the end of the session for any questions. So if you can try and hold them, that would be great. And then we'll do questions at the end of the session. Okay, so we're going to jump into Power Query and have a look on system, and then we can start getting through our demo. So let me just change over, and I will be ready to go. Fantastic. Hopefully everyone can see this as well. We had some resolution issues in my last session, so hopefully the people in the back row can actually see what we're looking at this time. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into AX, and we're just going to set up, I've already set up the document data source, but I'm just going to show you where it is, and this is where the OData feed becomes available. So within AX, we're using R3 CU8 today, even though it says R2 at the top, just ignore that. It is R3CU8. This functionality, though, isn't specific to R3CU8. You can do it on older versions as well. It's just what we're using for our demo today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Organizational Admin, Setup, Document Management, and Document Data Sources. So you may have been in here before if you use the Excel add-in tools. This is where we publish our services for the Excel add-in tools as well. If you're using web services for integration, there's a whole different range of tools that actually use these web services in the background. OData just happens to be one of them. So what we've actually got here, this is the one we're going to use. You'll see that we've got one set up as a query reference, and we're pointing to the proj transposting cube. So this is a standard query that's available within AX. It's not actually a cube, by the way. It's just the name of the query is cube, before everyone thinks that I'm connecting directly to a cube. So all we have to do to actually create one of these, click New. We select the module that we want to work within for reference. We select Query Reference. And then we've got access to all our standard queries within AX. So whether this is one that you're using out of the box, or one that you've created from a customization, or one that you go and create now for a specific report, they'll be available here. Once we've selected it, we go ahead and activate it, and that's it, basically. So now that data source is available on our web services that are deployed as an OData service, okay? What we're going to do now is we're actually going to jump into Excel and connect to that OData service. Let me just open up a new workbook. So we're going to jump onto the Power Query tab. Depending on which version of Excel you're using, you may have this installed or you may not. If not, you can go online and download it. It's a free add-in that you can download from Microsoft.com, and you can get the Power Query. Basically, it's sort of like the data tab that is in Excel, but on steroids. It's got a lot more functionality. It can support a lot more data sources, and it goes through these transformation steps that I'm going to go through today. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect from another data source, and we're going to connect from an OData feed. One thing that's worth touching on that I'm not really going to talk about much today is that you can work with lots of other data sources here as well. You can pull in data from other SQL DBs, other systems, Excel files, text files, Facebook, anything you want. You can pull that data in, you can merge it and actually work with it in your AX data. Power BI is nowhere near specific just to AX. It can work across any data source that you really want to work with in the background, okay? So our OData feed is actually published by AX. I'm going to cheat, and I've got it saved within so I don't have to type it. One thing to note here, this is a little bit of a trick. The cases that we use here on this query are actually important. There's a known feature with the Power BI refresh. When it looks up credentials, it is actually case sensitive. So not in your credentials, I mean in the actual URL that it looks up against. So when you put this query into Power Query, what you want to make sure is that you've got capital D, capital A, lowercase x, capital S, capital O, D, Q, and S. I made the mistake and burnt a lot of time by having a capital X in there, and my Power BI refresh wouldn't work for a very long time. So you can't control the casing of this because actually the OData service from AX publishes it. So all you can do is control it here in Power Query and make sure you put in the right one, okay? This is published, by the way, I got the question in the last session, where do you find out what this URL is? Basically, after this part, it's all fairly standard. The beginning will only be your server name. But in the links at the end of the deck that we'll see today, there is a link to the online TechNet page about how to do this. And on that TechNet article, we actually have that full URL, so you can go grab it at another time. So what we're going to do, we're going to paste that in and click OK. It's going to connect to our OData service, and then it's going to come back and show me all the different data models that I've got available. Okay? So today we're actually going to work with two, and you're going to see that I've done a merge within them as well. So we're going to say here I want to select multiple items, and I'm going to pull through proj transposting cube, and I'm also going to pull through my worker detail. Okay? Main reason for that is on proj transposting cube, we only have the rec ID of the worker. We don't actually have their name. So I'm going to pull through worker ID as well, just so I can put in that name into my visualization rather than having the rec ID. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click load. what this will do now is I'll actually go get all that data, load it into my Excel data model. Sometimes this can take quite a lot of time. I've got some sneaky ones already prepared today where I'm going to just jump ahead for the benefit of the demo. But what this would do is you would sit there, it would go through and load, extract all the data and load it into your data model. And here's one I prepared earlier. So there you go. Once it had loaded, you'd have that information loaded in, and you get a little preview. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to jump in and do an edit. So what happens here is you're going to see this is the raw data that comes directly through from AX. So a few things you notice is there's going to be lots of columns. As I said, this data source has 325 columns in it. I think typically when I've worked with this data source, I want to use about 20 of those. You'll notice the column names have got things like projtrans posting, underscore projtrans date, which is by nowhere near natural language. So when we get later on into Power Q&A and you want to ask Q&A natural language questions, it needs to know what the field's names are in natural language. And unfortunately, our labels from AX aren't exposed. Not to say, one day they won't be, but right now they're not. So for now, what we need to do is we need to deal with that here in Power Query so we can make the data a little more relatable. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of the types of things we can do here. One, you can filter your data. So you can apply a filter to the query and reduce your data set down. We can remove columns. So I can come in here and say, actually, which columns from my data set do I want to be available? So it'll go through here and actually give me a full list of all columns. I can tick the ones that I want. It'll extract the others. I can do things like changing my date and time formats. I can change from integer into text. I can do some very nice things with pre-calculated columns. So for example, let's say I wanted a year and a quarter column in my data, so I could add that into my graphs. What you'll notice here is I can click on a date field, come in and go, I want year, and I want year. And I'll actually add a new column now into my data set. You can do things like introduce calculated columns. So for example, a good example from Lotus actually is they expose all their shop floor scheduling data up into Power BI. So they have calculated columns around things like, is that particular job on schedule? Is it overdue? How late is it on the shop floor? Once we expose and calculate that type of information here in the query, we can actually put it into visualizations and actually make it look quite snazzy. So again, this takes quite a lot of time to clean up 325 fields. So you're not going to sit here and watch me do that for the next 4 hours or however long that might take. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this and I'm going to, again, jump into one that I've tidied up a little bit earlier. Sure.
Regarding the authorization, from which level can you control authorization so data you can get from?
So the OData security is managed through your AX security. So it connects through the AOS. So basically, if you have that user, whatever data and security they have access to within AX is how OData is managed. Now, an important note though, and what we're going to talk about quite a bit today, is once you publish the data into Office 365, then Office 365 manages the security to the data, okay? So once you extract it and it's in that workbook and it's published into Office 365, it's your security in Office 365 that then is managing it, okay? So you do need to be conscious about how and what you're exposing. Don't just go rip out financial transactions for every single company, throw it into one workbook and go put it on your SharePoint, because then everyone will be able to see that. So security is a planning consideration when you're looking at this technology. It doesn't just duplicate AX security and pull it into the cloud.
So to access the data from AX,
Yeah.
the user
Yes.
have to have an AX credential?
Yes, they do. So the user preparing the report in the first place. So the question was, does the user have to have access to AX? The person authoring the report has to have AX access. But once the report is authored, then they don't have to have AX access. Because once it's in the report and it's published on Office 365, then it could have come from anywhere. It's not necessarily come directly from AX. So then the question there is how the data goes with the refresh. So initially it goes through and it's just published in that workbook. It's stale data. Then we use our data management gateway to actually schedule a refresh. So then you specify credentials that are used for the refresh. So then you'll have a service account in the background that will actually do the refresh for you from on-premise data up into your data model within Office 365. But you would specify a service account for that. It does a full refresh. The reason is what you're about to see here is it reapplies these steps as well. So it goes through a little bit of work in the background. So here's the transformed data set, basically, of what I've gone through. What you'll see on the right-hand side here is you see all these steps that it's kept. So this is what I've actually gone through and done to this data. I've removed columns. I've added in a year. I've added in a quarter. I've renamed things. I've merged two data sets. So this is where I merged in the worker detail and brought it in. The end result then is actually quite a nice data set for the user to work with. So it's only about 20 columns then. They've actually got nice friendly names. The data's nice and clear, and I've removed anything that might confuse the user or make it a little bit rubbishy. The other benefit we get from this now, sorry, just give me 1 second. The other benefit we get from this now is, like I said, when we get into Q&A, the data's actually understandable. If I tell it I want to look at expense amounts for a project, it knows what a project is, it knows what an expense is. Sorry, do you have a question? So I have a feeling that the limit that was there last year, and unfortunately I'm not sure on the current one, it used to be 1.5 gig per data model. But don't quote me on that one. You would need to check on the Power BI team specs around what it is. It puts it into the data model, which sits within a workbook effectively, and puts it up into the cloud for you. So there was an initial limitation. I don't know whether that's increased or changed, but about a year ago, it used to be a 1.5 gig per individual data model. So one of these, queries basically had to be limited at 1.5 gig. Okay? Okay, let me jump back. So, some things that I've learned rather, over the last year around Power Query to keep in mind. By the way, for the guys taking photos, the recordings of these sessions and the downloads, I think they're targeting to have available in about 2 days. So they're going to be super quick for the AX sessions. Please, you can take photos all you like, but they will be available fairly quickly. So tips for Power Query. Start with the right query. There's 3,700 or something queries within AX available. Did you just take a photo of me? Yeah. Well, that's not going to be in the recording, okay? So start with the right query. Don't go and choose, It takes some time. It's not necessarily the easiest. It's not like we have a big listing on TechNet that says these are the best queries for you to look at. It's really going to be a personal decision. You need to have a look through them, find the one that's most suitable for you. But quite often, like I said, there are queries within AX that have a lot of the information you're going to need already joined. So don't let your immediate thought be, oh, I'm going to go grab these 5 queries and merge them all in Power Query. Quite often, if you can see the information presented in one place in AX, quite often we've already got a query backing that list page or backing that report sitting somewhere within AX. So you can grab that query and expose it out to Power Query. Sure. We're just now starting to look at the BI aspect of our implementation. And one of the common comments regarding the queries are, from the user's perspective, they don't want to be reaching out to IT to build queries and build reports. And with such a large list, how are the end users supposed to know what the functionality of those queries are? So, the last bit around data catalog. I'm going to get to that very quickly. So the question there was around how do end users really know which queries to use. This first step that I'm talking around here about start with the right query, it is more an IT professional, starting with the right AX query, okay? As we get through and we get to the end of this, towards the end of this process, that's when your end users should be looking at not necessarily the 3,700 queries. They should be looking at a data catalog of potentially what you've prepared, okay? The next point there, really, really important, the case sensitivity on OData. Don't let that one catch you. It doesn't stop you in OData, in Power Query because it all works. So you won't notice until you schedule your refresh. So keep an eye on that one. Keep security in mind. as we mentioned before, once you publish it into Office 365, that is managing your security for you. So don't extract, 10 years worth of financial data and go pop it on your SharePoint, because then everyone will be able to go access it. So you do need to keep that in mind. Transform your data. If I was going to give any advice of where to invest time with Power BI, it's in data transformation. That's where you're going to get your biggest benefit. It's going to make your visualizations easier. It's going to make your Q&A work better if you invest time into the transformation process. If you rush this, everything else, you'll spend more time doing everything else later. And the last one, save your common queries into your data catalog. So what I'm actually going to do, always going off script is a great idea. So I'm going to go back here. Once we've got this query, this is the data catalog I'm talking about. You'll notice up here I'm actually signed in to Power BI. So I'm signed in with my Office 365 credentials. What I can do is I can go right-click, send to data catalog. Okay? So what I can actually do is now I can go, this is a great query on project expense. Oh, I can spell transactions. I can give a link to the internal SharePoint where we've got some documentation around what's in that, and then I can also choose who has access to it. Everyone within our organization, a particular team or a particular department, and then I click send. And then what happens is that end transformed result of all those 15 things that I did, that nice end result, actually gets published as a query and it gets put into Office 365. So then what happens is other users then, so now more the end user experience, when they come into Excel, they can go into online search and they can go, oh, okay, I want to find project transactions. Oh, look, Clay's done this great query on project transactions. And I get that into Excel.
So you would even, from the transformation, that you would consider that more of an IT professional function?
I think you can start going to super users. It doesn't necessarily have to be IT professional, but you don't necessarily want your accountants going in and publishing web services and things like that. So there is going to have to be a little bit of a division of labor somewhere, depending how savvy your end users are. But once you've done that work, you've published it to the data catalog, then, like I said, within Excel, the end user comes here, they get a preview of the data, and they go, yep, that's the one that I want. They double-click it, and then it'll actually load into their workbook, and they can start building a visualization. So they've actually skipped all the work that we've just done. Only one person within your orgs actually had to do it. So leverage that as well. So transformation, invest the time, but then be smart about it and only invest it once. Save the query, make it available to your organization. Okay, so that's our first step, or our first two steps actually. We've extracted the data, we've done some transformation, so now we have a nice looking set of data sitting within Power Query. The next step we're going to do is we're going to create some visualizations. So we're going to use Power View today. There's lots of different visualization types. You'll see even in our sample, in our demo VMs that are available, we have Power Views built. You see the big power maps. There's lots of different visualizations. I'm going to create a very, very simple one today, just to give you an idea of, so we can go through the full process, and then we'll have a look at how we publish that out to Office 365. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back into that workbook that I had with the transformed data. I'm going to close my Power Query there. I'm going to go to Insert and go to Power View. Sometimes this can take a little bit of time. It has a little bit of a think. It loads up a new Power View for you. And what it's going to do is you'll see as soon as it loads, we actually have that data model that we've spent the time and prepared sitting off in our field list. So then we can actually just start directly accessing and pulling it through. So there you go. So over on the right-hand side, we've got project transactions, which is the one that we tidied up, which is our nice data source. And you can see now we've got all our nice names. We've only got sort of the 20 fields that we want to work with. So again, from an end user experience, it's a lot easier to work with. So we're going to create some, like I said, I'm going to be a bit sneaky here and I've got one pre-prepared, but to give you the idea of what you actually go through in this process, to actually start creating the visualizations, we actually just start ticking on fields here, and you'll notice over in the left, it will start putting together a visualization. So I can say I want amount by transaction date, and I also want the year and the quarter. So right now, this is actually obviously coming out in a terrible table over the left-hand side. No one would actually want to visualize it that way. And then we come up the top here, and I can say, put this into a stacked column. So it'll re-prepare that data now, group it up, and put it into a nice column chart for me. What you are going to notice, though, is sometimes the way it chooses to present the data isn't necessarily how you would want to view it. So then what we can start doing is going, okay, well, what I want is, I do want my value to be amount, but on my axis, I want year, quarter, and then transaction date underneath it. So what you'll notice is anyone that's worked with PowerView and the sort of data model in the background in earlier versions, you used to have to create visualizations manually, hierarchies manually in your data. So if you wanted it to understand that a year and then a quarter sits, there are 4 quarters within a year, you used to have to go and build that sort of hierarchy within the data model. Now what you can do is you can just throw them all into the axis, and what it'll actually do is make it so you can double click that now and you can drill in to the value and then drill in again and go one more level down to a transaction date. So this isn't just with date, you can do this with anything. You can have a client drill into a project, drill into a worker or something along those lines as well. So it makes keeping your visualization simple a lot easier because you can build drill throughs into your data very, very quickly. So what we're going to do there is, let's actually move year down to a multiplier. Multiplier, if you haven't worked with it before, basically means it does multiples of the chart. So it splits it out for you so you can see. So there's a year-on-year analysis, basically, of our project expenses, broken down by quarter. And then the only other thing we'll add in here is we'll throw in amount. We'll do client, project, and we'll put on our worker as well. So again, it's put it into a table, not necessarily the way we want to look at it. So I'm going to change that to a stacked bar, and I'm going to put a drill through on this as well. So I want it to go client, and then project. Oop, let it have a little bit of think, and then worker as well. So then I can come along here and say, actually, sort it by the amount and sort it descending. Okay. So now I can see Eastside Department Store is my top client for expenses, 11 million, fairly significant. I can double click that value now and go in and actually see the projects that they have within it. Double click again, and I can see the workers that are actually working on that project. Blank is obviously racking up a lot of expenses. Another one as well, if you haven't worked with these visualizations before, you can click now, and they'll actually cross-filter across the visualizations. So because it's all linked to one data source in the background, there goes my remote desktop session. What you'll notice is when it actually connects in the background, you can click on one part of the visualization and it will filter another one for you very, very easily. Like magic, as soon as I go away from it. There it is. So yeah, as soon as I've clicked Eastside Department Store, so a particular project, you'll notice up here some of the chart actually grays out. So now it's showing me out of those expenses across the year on year, which relate to that specific project. So again, you can start then interrogating and exploring that data in quite a powerful way as you look across it. So the end result of that, once you put in a couple of more visualizations, the one we're going to be working with today is going to look something like that. So basically the first two you saw me create, the last one is just an amount by category, very, very simple, but it's put it into a nice clear visualization that we're going to go ahead and actually publish that into Office 365. So, some tips for PowerView. Keep your visualizations simple. Power BI is not supposed to replace SSRS and every other reporting tool that you've ever seen on the planet. It's not supposed to encapsulate all into one. It does have a purpose and a place. It's supposed to be part of a reporting strategy, not necessarily replace everything else within your organization. So keep the visualization simple. Don't try and put too much on a particular chart. Basically, the way we've looked at it when we've been working with business is you should be looking at it going, okay, well, what type of problem are you trying to identify when you're looking at this Power View, and make sure the Power View answers that particular business scenario. Don't try and have it and go, well, I want to put in every single piece of financial detail related to a project on this one Power View. It's going to be very, very difficult for people to look at it and actually visualize a problem. Okay, they should be getting visual cues of what's going on. Size your visualizations with end user devices in mind. Power BI runs on HTML5. There are apps for Windows Phone, iOS. I can run it on my Lumia 925. If you make your visualizations font size 8 with very, very such, no one can do the touch, you know what I mean? Play around with the visualizations and do cross-filtering. So please try and keep in mind a touch-enabled experience when you're building visualizations. You want your users to be able to be working on their Surface, working on their iPad, using whatever device they've got, and be working and interrogating that data. You don't want to force people to have their mouse, you know what I mean, and work at very high resolution to be able to interact with the reports. Leverage hierarchies. These last two sort of points are very related. Leverage hierarchies. So as I had there, I had the drill from client into project into worker. Again, you can have detail within your visualizations by having it through drill down without having it all on the first page when it loads up. You know what I mean? So the detail can still be there, but people can interrogate to actually get to it. The last one is there are limits to the number of values you can have on charts. So the number of series, for example, if you've got 40,000 clients and you go add it to the legend on a chart, what PowerView will do is it will take a sample and you'll get a little warning at the top of your thing and it'll go, I've just sampled because I can't present 40,000 clients on a chart. So you need to be smarter about, you know, presenting it as a hierarchy. So go client group, you know what I mean, into a particular business unit and then into a client. So you can still have the information, you've just got to present it in a slightly smarter way. If you just try and throw everything in a huge amount of detail, PowerView will take sample sets and you won't actually get the full picture in your visualization because you've overcomplicated it. Okay, publishing. So now what we're going to do is we've connected to our query, we've pulled it into Power Query, we've transformed it, it looks pretty, we've created a visualization. Now we actually want to share that with other people within our organization. So at this point, it's just an Excel file sitting on my desktop. I haven't done anything with it. I haven't shared it with anyone else. So what we're going to do is we're going to publish it up into Office 365 so other people within my team and organization can actually work with the data. Okay. So I'm going to log into Office 365, which I already have, and I go into Power BI. So right now I've got no reports in here. I've just gone into a folder. As I mentioned before, when we get to this point, security is about to be driven now by Office 365 once I load it in here. So the folder that I'm loading it into, whoever has access to this folder will now have access to this data and to my report, okay? So you need to keep that in mind when you're planning your security. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say add, upload file, and I'm going to select my PowerView report and click OK. Give it a second. It'll upload this. It'll physically move the file up, store it on Office 365, and it's enabling it for Power BI at the moment. So it'll do a little bit of work. It reviews the visualizations and gets them ready, so they're visible now on web devices. So now all I have to do is I can click that PowerView report. And now again, if I was using the apps, if I was using mobile, whatever devices I would use, I can access this now as it's published within Office 365. Now at this point, it's still stale data. I haven't done my refresh or anything like that. You still have to go through the process now of scheduling a data refresh for this particular data set for it to continue to be updated. It takes a little bit the first time it loads up. It has a bit of a think. But there's our visualization available through the web now. You'll still notice you still get your tabs and things like that within Excel. So usually before you publish a real report, you'd tidy those up and wouldn't have sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3 down the bottom. You'd make it a little bit neater. But now it's exactly the same as what we were just looking at. Still interactive. I can still click and touch just through the web now. So very much the same experience that you get within Excel. It's just published up into Office 365. A little bit nicer for you to work with. Now, the next best thing about you publishing it in is this Excel data model is now sitting within your Office 365 tenant. So what we can do is we can publish this and make it enabled for Power Q&A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the workbook here, and I'm going to say add to Q&A. Added to Q&A. So the reason we do this at a workbook level is you don't necessarily want every single workbook you ever load to be processed by Q&A. So Q&A will review, it does data modeling, so you can ask it natural language questions. You don't necessarily want it looking at everything that you put into Office 365. So you have to specifically tell it, add this document to Q&A. What will happen now is when people go in and ask it questions, they'll be limited to the data sets that have been enabled for Q&A and that they have security access to, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, up in the top right-hand corner here, select Ask with Power BI Q&A. Okay, so Nothing yet. It starts with a blank sheet. Don't worry, this is what it's supposed to look like. It's not thinking. Now you can just start asking it questions as you go through. So if I say, for example, amount by project, what you'll see is it actually starts working while I'm typing. Oops, it's having a bit of a think. And it starts trying to prepare a visualization in the background. Amount by project. I'll say name, so it looks a little bit nicer for us. So this, by the way, we haven't done any optimization, okay? So this is, there was no trickery in the background there. That was just what I uploaded, okay? So that's just what I've uploaded, what it's done with it. I haven't taught it anything. It's just purely processed the data and it's able to do a little bit of a visualization for it, okay? So, and I mean, you can ask it sort of, you don't have to be very polite. You don't have to use like how and please and things like that. You can be fairly direct in your line of questioning with it. But I can say, for example, I want for fixed price. So it is actually picking up and it's presenting value. So now I'm just looking actually for my fixed price projects. And I can say by category. So I can actually introduce my category now. You'll notice in the gray line underneath, it's actually putting it back in its terms and telling you what it's interpreting. And I can say, actually, I want that as a bar chart. So there you go. So now I've got by my projects, I've got my expense amounts for my fixed price projects, and it's put into a visualization. So this isn't supposed to be, you know what I mean, something that I then go and run every day as a report. This is about exploring data. This is about you going in and going, I really need to see about what's happening on fixed price projects for expenses, not having to go find the report. You just come in and ask Q&A the question. Q&A presents the data back to you as a result. Now, I've used all the right words, obviously, for it to give me the right response. It doesn't always hit. Sometimes you'll ask it questions and it'll actually grey out the word and it'll say, I have no idea what you're talking about. And it'll apologize and say, sorry, I wasn't able to give an answer for that. What we do though, is we can start looking at then how we optimize that data. And this is, again, somewhere where you can start investing your time. So I'm going to jump into site settings. I'm just going to show you a little bit of the back end here of what it actually does. So now I can go and optimize this for Q&A. So this is a bit of a test optimization space here where, again, you can come and ask it questions. But what you'll notice is it's got things like auto-generated synonyms. So it auto-generated based on the column names that I gave it. How many was it? 1,767 synonyms for the words that I've already loaded in. So examples are, I called it project name. It knows, it said job name and mission name, and it comes up with a whole bunch of things that it can find online that people might refer to a project, and it stores that in as a synonym. So that when people then come in and use that word within Q&A, it's got a little bit of a better chance. So then what you start getting is we can come in here and we can actually look at these different columns, and these are all the ones that it's auto-generated. So I didn't do anything, but you can see here it's got project name, project, assignment, development, initiative, job, mission, plan, product, code name. So it's gone through, worked all this out and put it in. Now within your organization, if you called your project Sally or whatever you wanted to do, you could come in here, program this in as a synonym. So then when people ask its questions, it knows how to respond to it, okay? So it'll learn what it can from, the general world. But if there's organizational specific terms that you use, you have to put in that time to teach it. No. No. So right now as well, Q&A is available in English only right now. So the language information from AX unfortunately isn't published. And that's not going to be a question I'm going to be able to answer at the moment, sorry. It's still, in general, Power BI is an area we're spending a lot of time in, so watch for developments, but specifically on languages, I don't know anything about that at this point, okay? So what you can do here is usage. So it actually collects usage data around how people are using Q&A. So you can come in here and see Clay Wesner, he's asked 7 questions. You can see what he's asking and what visualizations he was getting. You can also come in here and say unrecognized words. So you can say, he said fixed, and I didn't know what fixed meant. So as an administrator, you can then start optimizing your data by coming in and seeing what users are asking, what visualizations they're getting back, what's working, what's not working. And so if people are coming in every single day and asking the same questions and they're not getting responses, you can then start teaching Q&A and say, okay, well, when they use this particular phrasing or this particular word, this is what they mean, and you can relate it back to the data. Sure. Yeah, so you can, in there you put in, you basically break by comma. So you can have two words that represent the same thing. Okay. So that's sort of that optimization aspect of Q&A. Also as well, once you answer a question, or ask a question, sorry, if you really, really like it, we have a concept of featured questions, which basically saves it, makes it available to other people as well. Okay. So that was sort of the exploring the data aspect. Sorry, I've missed a couple of slides here. This is the exploring data aspect. So once we've loaded it with Power View, into Power BI, we can start using Q&A and explore a little bit more. Yeah?
For that, the learning that you do, that's only applied to that specific report, right? So if you have 5 groups of reports, you need to put them in, and then each group learn the same thing.
So the question is that optimization, does it relate to the work? To the specific report. It actually relates to the data model. So basically what you would happen, even if you were using project transactions in 5 different reports, you would enable project transactions once for Q&A. So you would optimize it there. You wouldn't enable the same data source 20 times and optimize it on all. If you, for example, though, had it secured separately, so you had the same data source but secured into different data models, you can then export and import that optimization. So once you've done it on one and you've taught one, you can export it and import it into the other data models if they're the same. Okay? So tips for Power BI and Q&A, harpen back to Power Query. Invest the time with Power Query. Because while it was a very simple visualization that we made just by asking it a question, it wouldn't have worked if I didn't spend the time in Power Query to clean up field names and actually tidy up the data just a little bit. Hi.
How does this work for multiple companies, right? Because one of the things is management reporting across companies is, other than MR,
Yes.
do it. So will this handle that?
Yes, so the question there is reporting across companies. So actually, that's one thing that it's really, really good at because, again, the AX security isn't once it's published. So basically, by standard, it will be the person authoring, whatever access they have is what data will be exposed, okay? Yep. Yes. But you've got to remember, though, is if you expose, if you pull 10 companies' worth of data into one report and save it onto Power BI, that's how it will be presented to users, 10 companies' worth of data. Okay, they don't see their company then when they log in. You're then looking at an organizational level.
But you could have a filter on it then, basically, by...
If you wanted to apply a filter. So what we'll talk about in a second is when we get into the new version, SSAS has got some nicer things in how to manage that. Optimize your data from Q&A. So again, an example of what we're doing with Lotus Formula One team is we're actually getting them to just run it Q&A first as a bit of a pilot. So give it to a few users, let them ask questions, do some optimization before they roll it out to the whole organization. In the beginning, it will take it time for it to, obviously your users to learn how to use it, but then also Q&A needs time on how to understand your business. So what you don't want to do is just let 4,000 people in on day one and start bombarding it because they'll get a lot of questions that it needs time to learn on. So you need to invest some time in that optimization phase. And the last point there around, again, plan your SharePoint security. So once you've published that data, AX security is not enforced. You need to be planning your SharePoint security to manage that once it's loaded. What's next for Power BI? So this is going to be very, very quick. This is not really AX specific related at all. This is just interest. Hi. So sorry, I'm not actually doing the schedule refresh. I'll talk about it very, very quickly, but I'm not actually configuring it. Basically, the concept there with the data management gateway, it's scheduled through the Power BI. So once we've done this process of what we've just been through, I'll flick back actually. Let's go do that. Again, off script. It's a secret for success in these sessions. So basically what we do is once we've actually gone and through and done that, we need to we go into the Power BI Admin Center. We would have installed our data management gateway on-premise, okay? So we actually have an application that sits on-premise. It has a certificate and a secure connection then up into our Office 365 implementation. So once we've done that, what we then do is actually come in here to Office Power BI Admin Center, and we add in our particular connection to our production instance or our test instance. Oh, and I don't have access to go into that. I don't know why I don't have access, but I don't. So what would happen when I went in there, basically you take the connection string, you know, the data connections tab within Excel, and you get that big, huge connection string. You take that from Excel, you go into Data Management Gateway, paste it in, and it goes through, you set the credentials, and then that credentials is then set up within a Data Management Gateway. So first step is you tell Power BI, how do I navigate down to this data source on-premise and connect? The second step then is once you've actually got that set up in the background, on the particular workbook, we go schedule data refresh, okay? So as soon as that is set up in the background and we've got that secure connection, I can then come here and say, this is how often and when I want my workbook to refresh, and it'll process and run those refreshes for you. You only need to set up the gateway for the OData service. You don't need to set it up for each individual query. So basically, you would need to set up in Power BI Admin Center, like one for your production instance, one for your test instance, one for your dev instance. You don't have to add in every single time, like proj transposting, that sort of stuff. Does that answer your question? Sorry, that was brief. Hi.
I think you're saying the security is controlled by the person who calls for his report, and then you're doing a refresh for the service account.
Mm-hmm.
So that service account probably needs different privileges for all the different types of reports, so we need to get different results.
So again, you have the choice then of you can set it up with one, or you can set multiple, but typically what you would do then as well is in Power Query, you would set your filters. So you can start controlling the data that way when you actually run the query, rather than relying on security to run the query. If you did require separate service accounts though, you can set up multiple data sources within Data Management Gateway, and you would paste in across multiple connection strings. It's optional, but I suppose, again, it depends on what your security model is, okay? Sure.
Is the number that you can include on the reports that are generated, the as of date for the last refresh?
It shows it, again, let me flick back. It shows it down the bottom there. Clay Wesner, 13 minutes ago. So it shows you who and how fresh the data is. That's what that has under there. So if it was a scheduled refresh, it would tell you who scheduled the refresh and then what time it was last refreshed. Hi. So not at the moment. I'm actually just going to look at someone in the audience just to qualify, but there wouldn't be examples in the VM. Power Q&A, though, unfortunately requires Office 365. So there's no Q&A within the VM because you require an Office 365 tenant running in the background. So there's not necessarily, we do have a lab later today. If you actually want to run it, there's one at 1 o'clock today in one of the lab rooms upstairs where we have a VM set up and we have an Office 365 tenant for you, and you can go through this whole process that we've just shown, actually go through the publishing. Unfortunately, in the VMs that you get online from us though, we can't include Office 365 with that. Okay, what's next for Office 365? Some snazzy things. This is going to be quick, this sort of last as I'm starting to run out of time. Dashboards. So if you've what we've just been through, we've prepared visualizations in that one single sheet, and we've published that up into Power BI. What dashboards allow you to do then is, as a user or as a team, actually pick different visualizations from different reports and bring them into one common dashboard, okay? So rather than you having to look at the way a particular Power View report, you can go, that one little part of the Power View I like, you can pin it back to your dashboard or your team dashboard, okay? So they can become a lot more interactive. Also then what you can do then is from that dashboard, drill into that particular Power View that supports it in the background, okay? New visualizations, this is just a few examples. So we have funnel charts, which show you, percentage of change across different values. Combo charts, so in the current version, you can either do like column or you can do line. They've introduced new functionality now so you can actually do both and do some comparisons of different values. Tree maps, I'm not sure if people have seen tree maps before. Basically the boxes represent the amount or the value that you've got in the background, so the size of the boxes will change. Gauges and fill maps. You would have seen maps currently, but they do it as a dot. And basically fill map now, so you actually can fill a zone of a map with a different color or a chart in the background. One of the other very, very cool this is in preview at the moment. This isn't officially released, but they've introduced live connectivity now for on-premise data. So this connects through, there's a tool that gets installed on-premise, the SSAS connector. Basically what you can do is you can have a dashboard, you can have a visualization that connects back through that connector into your SSAS database, and you can explore that data live. So that's not all the stuff I just told you about on-prem and loads it up into the cloud and all that sort of stuff, not for this example. So you basically have the option then of exposing a data source that's live connectivity back to on-premise, okay? The big caveat for this one for the AX people, obviously, is this is connecting right now, this supports SSAS tabular databases, not multidimensional, okay? So the out-of-the-box SSAS database that we deploy. Hi. So yeah, so the question there is, this is the best method for row-level security. So the SSAS tabular model will enforce your role-based security from SSAS when people access. So if you had a more complicated model of 400 companies, every person accesses one company, you can then get to a model where SSAS is managing your security rather than you having to do it through multiple workbooks, okay? So this is definitely a space to watch. It's a great sort of development in the Power BI space, and it's going to be very interesting. Multiple devices, they've released apps for iPad, iPhone, Windows devices. That all runs on HTML5. Like I said, I can run it on my Lumia 925. They've added a lot more from a technology perspective. It's very easy and very accessible now as well. Okay, so we're going to have a very quick look at it as well, just in preview. For those people, preview is currently only available within the US. If you are in the US and you're currently using Office 365, you should have an option that sort of says try the new powerbi.com, and you can go in and actually have a look at it and have an explore. And I know they are working on trying to get the preview availability a little bit wider around the globe than just the US. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up powerbi.com. So this is the new sort of experience. You'll notice it is slightly different. Basically on the left-hand side there, working our way from the bottom up, you'll see we've got data sets. So this could be anything from a workbook. So the one I've loaded in is actually that same project transactions transformed one we just went through. I've uploaded that. You could have a SSAS connection. You could have a connection to Dynamics CRM. You could have a connection to Salesforce. Basically, there's a whole bunch of different data sets that you can expose that would sit there as your data sets. Reports then are very much like what we were just looking at before, a single pane visualization that you would build through PowerView. And then dashboards are then you picking and choosing from those different visualizations on what you actually want to see. And then once you expose it here, you've actually got a dashboard then as a user that I can scroll through and have a look of what I've published on mine. And if a particular one interests me, I can click it and it'll take me into that visualization or that report that's related to it. Once you're in there, it's still very similar in how the current model operates. It's an interactive report that you can play with. One of the other really nice things, and that you can, again, you can personalize this, you can make it, you know what I mean, really however you want to work with the data. Some cool things that they've done is they've reintroduced, for people that used PowerView back on-premise SharePoint, they've reintroduced the option now for you to author on the web. So you can actually create Power Views without having to use Excel. So within here, again, once I've got my data set, I can click Explore and come in, ignore my worker detail, sorry, but I can come in here and go, yep, I want amount, business unit, and client name. Create a visualization. And save it. And then I've actually saved that as a report. So then I can see my client by business unit. I've got that as a report now. I can even click on it, click pin, and it's been saved back to my dashboard now. So now it's sitting on my dashboard as an end user. So it's a much more web-enabled experience on powerbi.com. You've still obviously got all those options. They've actually made an app now, Power BI Designer as well. So there's a standalone app that you can go build reports in. So they've introduced a huge amount of functionality that's going to come out this year around Power BI. One of the other very nice things that you can do, again, around the dashboard is Q&A, same thing. Rather than going into a separate area within Power BI. It's actually sitting on your dashboard. So again, I can say amount by project name. If I worked with a particular client, for example, I could say amount by project for district mall. So this is actually exposing a particular client now. And I can say as a bar chart, please, as a bar chart. No? No. Oh, there we go. Preview, everyone. So basically, sorry, I wasn't able to find a good answer. There we go. Anyway, so once that question's actually been answered, I can click pin again as well, and it's put it back onto my dashboard. So once I come down here, there he is. It's been saved, so that's the question that I just asked it through Q&A, and I can even come here and go edit now. This is my district mall project expenses, okay? And so I can save that now, and it's personalized for me as a user within my dashboard, okay? So it's a little bit easy to work with, creating visualizations, pull it into a dashboard a lot quicker than it is in the current experience. So this is all in preview at the moment, as I mentioned. It is coming out this year though, so keep an eye on it. It is going to be very, very interesting, especially the way it works with, so the functionality that we're going to see that we can leverage within AX. Some great resources for you guys to have a look at, specifically around powerbi.com, along with already probably all the AX blogs that you're already looking at. If you want to see a walkthrough example, there's a great walkthrough example of preparing a data mashup on TechNet that you can go through and follow. The second one, the Power BI team blog. Power BI team release things like there's no tomorrow. They have updates coming out all the time to Power Query, powerbi.com. That team blog is the best way to follow it. They have very good detail on what they're releasing and when they're going to do it. And Power Q&A cloud modeling. So that last one there is that whole step of optimization, monitoring the usage, teaching it phrasing, all those types of things. There's a lot of detail that's been published online around how to do that process, because obviously you can be fairly advanced in how you do it as well. So it's really a good resource to go through. The link is far too long, sorry, that's why it just says here on Microsoft.com. But I promise when you get the copy of the deck, there is actually a link behind that. I'm not just trying to trick you. Little bit of housekeeping, and then it'll open up for questions. There is an instructor-led lab. Obviously, you've missed the first one. But the second one is this afternoon at 1 o'clock upstairs. So what you'll basically do is we have, if you haven't seen the lab rooms, they're set up with 100 PCs in them. There's lab VMs, there's Office 365 tenants, and you actually go through, extract data, do some transformation, build a Power View, publish it, get to play with Q&A. It's a very simple example, but you get to go through that whole process. So if you'd like to get more hands-on with what you've just seen today, please come along to the lab this afternoon. I'll be there. You get to be hands-on. It's nice paced. You know what I mean? You can get through and hopefully learn a lot from it. If we have any questions, I'm going to have to ask you guys, because I'm going to lose my voice if I have to keep repeating. There is a mic out in the middle of the room, I believe. Thank you very much. If you do have questions, if you could come up to the mic, it would be greatly appreciated if it's easy. Did that just deter a question? I was about to say, you're about to ask one. Come on. Yeah.
Two-part question.
Sure.
So with the new technology, getting data, do you still need Excel or SSAS, or is there a new tool to get to the data source?
So you've basically got options. So with SSAS, if you want to use like SSAS on-premise with powerbi.com, you install the connector and you create that data set in that data set option that we saw there. Excel doesn't come into it at all, basically. And then you begin to you build visualizations either on the web or using the Power BI Designer app. So you don't actually have to use Excel in the background. The data we were just looking at then, I still used Excel to prepare that. So basically moving forward, you're going to have a lot more options in how you connect to data. From an AX perspective, out of the box right now, through OData, through Power Query is still going to be the option. We don't have an out of the box, tabular database. So still the stock standard option that you're going to have is going through that Excel process. But what you would do in the new experience is you would prepare the data set in Excel and save it as a data set onto powerbi.com. You wouldn't necessarily go through and build all your Power Views in Excel. You would either do that on the web or the Power BI Designer app.
Because I guess the second part of my question is there's a limitation what you can put in Excel, so you can use Power Pivot, but Power Pivot only comes with Excel Professional, or the standard Excel if you buy it separately.
Yep.
So that limitation hasn't gone away. If you still want large data sets, you still need Excel Pro.
Yeah, sorry, I'm shocking with my Excel version, so I don't want to comment one way or the other, but I don't believe there's been any changes in that regard. But again, if you're dealing with a large data source and you've got concerns around that, SSAS on-premise connectivity is probably going to be a good option.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, not a problem. Any other questions before we wrap up today? We've been taking questions throughout, so we might be okay. Yeah, sure.
I have a question. What would you tell a prospective customer that is insisting on using Tableau and wants to pull lots of data out of AX?
Oh, God. Can we stop the recording just for this? No. Look, explore your options. So I've had this conversation a few times this week about, you know what I mean, what even within the Microsoft stack, what to use, we have lots of ISVs. You know what I mean, there's a plethora of choices out there. My advice is always explore. Sorry, it's probably not the answer that you want, but you know what I mean, there is going to be different products, ISV, standard Microsoft technology. It's all going to suit different organizations in different ways. My only advice would be that people do explore what is out there, because there are some that, you know what I mean, yeah, look amazing. You know what I mean, they have very amazing visualizations. As long as they've got some future proofing in them, they can deal with customization, they're going to deal with our upgrades well, then, you know what I mean, it's really going to come down to what they're trying to prioritize as a business. You got to remember, a lot of the stuff we looked at today, it's tools. Some of the other systems that you'll find in ISVs, they'll have a lot of pre-prepared content that they'll come with. You know, they'll come with thousands of KPIs and things like that. So the stuff that we're talking about here, you know what I mean, it's a tool set that you've still got to invest a lot of time in actually preparing. Sorry, that was probably not as hard an answer as you wanted. Any other questions from the group before we break?
Just real quick.
Yeah.
I've kind of watched this for the last few years. What happened to Excel Server?
Excel Server. I don't know whether it was just rebranding or whether there's actually been a major technology change.
That isn't part of what's behind all of this.
Well, so yeah, again, I'm probably not the best person to ask. Melinda, though, one of our R&D team from BI and reporting, sitting just down the row from you, may be able to comment. If he comments, then I can repeat his answer for the recording.
So, Power Pivot in Excel, in Excel 2010 used to be driven by Excel services. But behind the scenes, what happened was analysis services running SharePoint is now pulling the load for Power Pivot. So, behind the scenes, they've changed the technology.
Okay, that's all I needed.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Hi.
Will there be any formatting options in Power BI? I mean, if you want to customize the color scheme, or if you want to add,
Do you mean to the visualization? So the question was changing colors and formatting. So within the visualizations, you can choose color themes. They've just recently introduced some options for you to specify your own colors. Yeah, it's not super easy. There's a blog post about it. You need to specify like the hexadecimal color codes and things like that. It's very, very detailed. But if you have a look at that Power BI team blog, there's actually some details on how to do it there. For the more end user experience, you just pick from the preset Office themes that you have a list from. But I know it is something that regularly comes up in Power BI feedback, in that people want to be able to do custom themes like they can do everywhere else in Office. So it's probably an area that's going to improve. Apart from that, you can choose font sizes, you can add images in, add backgrounds, all that sort of stuff. So you can pretty them up quite a lot. Okay?
So from that question before, are you focusing purely on cloud? So SharePoint, Power BI, go away?
No, so again, I'm not going to comment on whether that's not necessarily. Obviously, the focus today was what we're talking about. We still have clients using the Power BI tools on-premise. Obviously, things like Q&A, there are limitations to what you can do on-premise. So Q&A isn't available on-premise. It's a cloud-powered tool, so it requires Office 365 to be running. But you can still leverage SharePoint on-premise with like Power Views and visualizations within SharePoint. PowerBI.com, the new one, is cloud-based. Yeah. So the functionality we looked at the end there, the sort of what's next stuff, that's all cloud-based. Okay. Your feedback. Do your evals, please. So I get paid at the end of the month. No, it is really, really important in how we shape the content for these sessions, what we know how to repeat, do more of, do less of. Please make sure you do your evals. It is very, very much appreciated. And thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.